Record to the clock. Good. So welcome everyone to the weekly Stockbridge Poetry Hour. We've been hosting this program since Poetry Month of 2020, which was April 2020. And we're very pleased this week to have Robin, how do I say that?
Lysne.
Lysne, okay, I just want to read for us. She is an MA, MFA, and PhD, and is the author of 9 books, an artist, an energy medicine practitioner, medium, and psychic. I think, Robin, you have the most attributes of anyone who's read for us. So
Well, thank
maybe
you.
there'll be a little psychic. There's going to be a shadow working through the behind you when you talk. There's going to be currently she is launching a legendary ancestral woman series with two works of historical fiction to bring to life the courage and wisdom of her Norwegian ancestors. I think that's really great. I mean, there's a lot of novels, prose, poetry. It's a very long bio. So, Robin, if I read it, there'd only be 5 minutes left for us to.
No problem.
Yeah. So, let's start out with, where do you find refuge now?
Well, I have a meditation group that I'm involved in, that I have been involved in for many years now. And it's based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. And one of the things that he said was that the safest place is in your spine. And that really resonated with me when I first heard it. And the more that I focus on my channel of light, which is everyone has, I'm not any different than anybody else. We all have that channel of light. That the more I focus there and bring myself inward, which actually COVID has done for all of us, it's brought us into ourselves. I find that I love this world and feel safe in it, and feel more safe than I ever have. So it's a paradox, but it does work, and it's more of an experience than it is, any doctrine that I could give to anybody, or a poem. But I have several poems about being within the self and how does that feel and things. So especially during COVID, I think we all came into it a lot more clearly, came into refuge more clearly.
So how does the meditation group work? Do you meet once a week, like online or in person, or?
Well, we have it's a worldwide organization. The main group is up in Ananda Village in Nevada City, California, and we have a group here, Ananda Monterey Bay, which is our little extension. And we had a center, but then we had to close it down, and the minister left, and all kinds of things, crazy things happened with the fires that we had here, and so on. So we decided to just go online, and there were a group of us that got together. So we meet online twice a week on Sunday morning, and then we also meet on in the afternoon. But there's Ananda groups all over the world, and there's one in Boston, and there's one out east, and Michigan, and you can go on to the ananda.org and find whatever group you want, and it'll really be helpful for learning meditation and then being within the self. And
how do you spell that name?
It's A-N-D, Ananda, A-N-D-A-N-A.
Okay.
Ananda.
And Donna. Okay.
A-N-D-A-N-A. Ananda.
Okay, great.
A-N-D-A-N-A. Lots of A's in there.
So just, obviously you're in touch with a lot of people with meditation group and the writing group, things like that. Is refuge a term that comes up in the conversations?
I would say that refuge is a word that gives I don't know that we have thought of it that way, but finding safety. I think another way to think of refuge is safety, and finding safety within the self, finding safety in our experiences and how we feel about ourselves and others really helps to create safety in the world. A lot of my work with people and energy medicine is about helping to shift their fear base to love base. So a lot of us are act out of survival, and we don't act necessarily um, out of love and out of compassion and out of empathy for others. We do this instead.
Yeah.
And say like you find a homeless person on the street or something, and people tend to do this around the other side of them.
Yeah.
But and it's usually because we're afraid of that for ourselves. So learning compassion and being compassionate is a very big key, I think, in refuge, in finding refuge.
Great. Great.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of poems you'd like to read for us now?
Yeah, I'll let's see. I have one that I call the Shutdown #1. It was a long time without money, with the holidays and the shutdown over. We expected the flow of funds to return, but just a trickle comes in with no pirate ship booty. Even those with money seem to be holding on to their treasure. Mary and I, old friends from high school, she a federal worker, not getting paid, I a business owner, not getting paid, call across country to check on each other. We talk a long time. We each light a candle and send prayers for the other. Then in last night's dream, everything is going to be all right comes out of the Caribbean radio. Those coins from a sunken ship shower me, and suddenly the flow is back on. My coffers fill up, standing knee-deep in gold and silver doubloons all around my feet. I know Mary, and I unlocked something deep. She gets her check. I get more clients. On the next call, we both wonder, what could be possible next?
Hmm. Very nice. Very nice.
So the other piece of, I think, refuge is holding others in the love that we want for ourselves. And I think very often that's what we end up doing is helping others, and we find we help ourselves. So
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm looking down, I'm just writing some notes. I try to
okay.
capture a few moments here.
Yeah. Well, the other poem I have, if I could share this, is
Yeah.
a poem I wrote that ended up being a theme for the Virginia Tech bench dedication for the survivors of the Virginia Tech massacre that happened several
Yeah.
years ago. And they ended up using this as the president used it as a theme for his talk. And I was so touched and grateful. It's called First Step. Beginnings are sometimes foggy. The path is not always clear. The end of one begets another. To begin, put one foot in front of the other. Your foot knows where to land, the one that moves forward first. Forget about the best foot. Just put it out there. Stop traffic if you have to. Go home if that is where it leads you. Go back to work if that is where your foot falls. You don't have to go anywhere. Just rest. After you step, take another. Forget about the weather. Step, step again.
Hmm. Very inspirational. Yeah. I like that.
Thank you. Well, it gives people a way to move forward, when we have been immersed in this COVID craziness, and Now with the war that's going on in, Ukraine, it's how do you begin again? How do you start over? And that was the poem I wrote for my new beginning.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So some poets have interpreted refuge as refugees. So
uh,
we kind of branched off into that conversation, and no, it really brings up it brings up, I guess, a couple ideas to me is, is refuge a choice, or is it, you're making a choice, or are you just basically pushed into it
uh,
because there is the what you would leave behind is not a choice.
uh-huh.
I feel like, uh, yeah, I know. No, I think part of it is I'm wondering, are people seeking refuge more, or are they seeking it more only when kind of troubled times accumulate for them and they have to see it, have to seek it? I was
Mhm.
just thinking, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that refuge is something that we run to when we're afraid, but then once we recognize that we're safe within ourselves and that as we create more safety in ourselves, then we find less and less something that we need to run from. I think we can also run to things in refuge. And one of the places I like to go in refuge is hot springs, and we have a lot of them out here
Yeah.
in California. So this is a poem I wrote called "The Sirens of Avila," and Avila Springs is a place south of where I live.
Okay.
The sirens of Avila, they come with wet, hot fingers, loosening old armor, making the swimming easy. You roll on your back as they loosen your coiled shoulders, locked in place by hours of driving. Those sirens lick every inch of silken skin. You have traveled far enough, too far for anyone. They come for you again, back into the heat, over and over, until you are limp with their voices.
So what do you
So
do? Is it like a natural spring where you gotta just sit down into it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. There are several hot springs here. One of my favorites is Wilbur Hot Springs, which is up north from Santa Cruz and about 3 hours away. And they have baths that you can sit in, and they're large channels of hot water of different temperatures, and you can get into them. And they have minerals in them, and they actually just you can just feel um, the tension just leaving. It was almost like the hot water strips away your tension and stress. And I've gone there many years over and over again just to chill out. Because I do a lot of different things, and so I need a place where I can just be quiet, and they demand silence in the tubs. So that's one place where I like to go
They
to
demand sense. I mean,
help myself.
do people keep the rule on silence, or
Yes,
do you
they
see
do.
couples chit-chatting?
Well, occasionally you'll see a few people chit-chatting, but people turn around and go shh because they appreciate the silence in the hot water and in back in nature. I think nature is a huge refuge for us.
So let me ask you this, just because of your background. So this is
Yeah,
more about what I told you as questions arise for me.
yeah.
Prose, poetry, artist, psychic, medium, when you sit down, or when the writing urge happens, do you have to figure out what hat you have on?
No, because they're all kind of under one hat anyway.
Okay. I didn't know if you were writing, all of a sudden, you feel like, there's a medium, I just didn't know if there's, all of a sudden you're feeling like you're in kind of a medium moment, and
Oh,
the writing is this, or maybe it's just purely artistic and you're just going with that kind of flow. I just didn't know if
yeah.
there are different, it's like different colors of the rainbow. I just didn't know if you're,
Right. Right. That's a nice way to think of it. Actually, no, it's all part of who I am. So if a poem comes up about spirits or um, people past lives or a spirit comes and visits me, sometimes
yeah,
I write about that. And
yeah,
I've written about that with my mother, who didn't uh, kept coming back after her death, not in a very good way sometimes. She came back and attached to me and wanted to pull me into the other world. It's attachment, and I had to actually get get a Maori medicine woman to help me get her energy away from me for a while after her death, and then we've made peace since then. And
yeah,
but those kinds of things happen to people more unconsciously, and it's common when someone passes that other members of the family will be attached to and pulled over
yeah,
occasionally. Sometimes there's more than one death in a family, and but what I was aware of when she passed was that I needed to stay here. I needed to be here and keep serving. And so for me, that the channel of mediumship and psychic awareness and all of that stuff is just part of who I am. And then if it comes out in a poem, it comes out in a poem. I try to relate to people though. I
yeah,
try to do it as relational as I can because I feel like everyone is psychic. Everyone has abilities intuitively. We just don't focus on them. And if you don't have to focus on, sometimes some of us don't have to focus on them. We learn them, we have them naturally, and we have to learn how to cope with them in the world. That's a different orientation, but everybody has intuition.
yeah. I think you'd find at times people haven't thought about in 30 or 40 years, are suddenly on center stage.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to think like, where'd you come from? How did you get back here?
Uh-huh.
Uh, so do you have some more poems you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, here's another one that kind of tells you about uh, the hot springs. Another hot springs poem. It's called "The Waters Are Black Silk." My body is scattered, floating. I die in a warm silk water embrace over and over. Hot black fingers seep in to draw out the knots stored between bones and flesh. Bubbles of stars break the heavy surface. A sulphur ring the color of sun-bleached straw, line the edges of this long rectangular tub. Laying aside the past, I sort it carefully to stitch the wounds so thick with pain. It is time to heal, the days of long ragged grasses, held in a fervor not woven till now.
Mm, very nice.
Mhm.
Very nice.
Thanks. Yeah, so different places can be refuges for us. I think our homes can be refuges. Um, so I think that's another way to think of refuge for me. Is like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, whenever my wife's more of a traveler than I am, so I'm probably yeah, my travel philosophy is I'm usually the happiest when I'm on my way home.
There you
No,
go.
because I guess this is the place where, it is safety, it's refuge, it's the place where I belong for a while. So no, no, a friend said that to me one time when I was driving on the Mass Pike back from a meeting in Boston, and she was saying, I can tell you're excited now by your voice. You're going home. I
Uh-huh.
said,
Uh-huh.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think homes can be a place of refuge. I know I'm sitting in my studio with new art pieces that I'm working on, and this is a refuge for me for sure. Yeah. And I think sometimes places or people, communities can be refuges too. Um, I have a poem that I'd like to share that's called
Yeah.
Beach Closed.
Okay.
Uh, it's called Beach Closed, Capitola Beach, Santa Cruz County, 3/11/2017. So this occurred right after the election of the last president. I watch another family straddle the same sign to explore what winter has washed in. Logs tossed like matchsticks are made into teepees. The children duck in and out to play and hide and seek. There must be all races of people out there. Their children exploring what they find, turning over shells, picking up sticks, looking for treasures. It's a human happiness to beachcomb. A flock of pigeons peck the sand and strut and chase after females, like those teenagers over by the rocks chasing each other. People break rules in Santa Cruz. It's our duty. We together, we do it together as the sun is going down slowly, even as some are leaving the beach one by one, except those surfers who jog their way through logs and people to reach the waves. And for some unknown compulsion, I sit here, amused and happy with them, listening to Spanish and Farsi, Hebrew and Serbian, African jibe, and all of us together on the same plot of earth and sea and sky, as one family who break the rules imposed on us. And I am writing it down furiously. I must be their scribe.
Wow. That's been quite an event.
Well, watching people walk over the sign that says beach closed, one
Oh yeah,
after
you told me
the
about
other
that.
with their
Yeah.
families, and especially after that particular election, it was quite touching for me that they were all breaking the rules together and saying, no, we're not doing this. We're not
Yeah.
being confined by this president.
So let's if we can just switch to the witnessing theme.
Yeah.
So I think we've had a lot of poets, and I think a lot have said, well, every poem is witnessing something,
Mm-hmm.
or giving you some insight into witnessing. So I just want to get your take on what witnessing means to you, or uh, maybe how it shows up in your week in, week out life.
Yeah. I think witnessing is about observing ourselves first, and witnessing ourselves in a community. So what I do with witnessing, I mean, it's kind of a habit that I have, something I do a lot because a lot of my work with individual people is to witness what's going on for them and then see the energy that's stuck in different places and helping to show that to them and bring it out so that we can recreate their flow of their life force.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we all have a life force that moves through us, and that is to me, the energy of our presence here and the energy of whatever divine thing can be
Yeah.
called God, if we call it God. But what's powerful to me is witnessing what's going on within ourselves. That's the most powerful thing, and I think that gives us a great experience of inner peace. And I happen to have a poem about that.
Great. Fantastic.
Okay. It's called We Like Dusk. Dusk. We like dusk. Take me down to the water at dusk when everything quiets. This is my time. Those who walk the cliffs like me are not talking on their cell phones. Instead, they sit on their own benches, 6 feet apart, as night encroaches, and hum. Wharf lights blink on, orange and pink, splashing the darkening sky. Boats sway on the bay with their lights hovering, making circles on the water to find their catch. Many walk by, and I am feeling those currents waving with seagrass and kelp below the surface. We don't have to talk or chat. We just vibrate with everything. Day slips away, in concert with the waves lapping, lapping, as stars poke through, orange fades completely. A rim of fog behind the boats pours over Monterey, and all the tumult that is going on in the rest of the world. I am those waves of change inside, those same currents in the constant rhythm of the sea, in the demand for change, the demand for truth to be told. I am with them here, listening to this moment, this momentum of relentless transformation.
Mm. Yeah, I think the ocean and the beaches give you a lot of context or DNA for your poetry and probably prose.
It does, yes. It's where whenever I am needing inspiration or to rest, I often go to the beach. So we're lucky that way, living near the ocean. But I think there are lots of different places that people can have as refuge in nature. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, in the Berkshires, pretty where we were in Stockbridge, all these two-lane roads that were up and down and curvy, and everywhere you looked, there was a mountain. Every time
Uh,
you drove, you were looking at mountains, and
yeah.
it really had a nice. That's the one thing. I mean, here where we are in Maine is flat. We're only about 20 minutes from the ocean, but we
Mhm.
don't see the mountains every day like we used to.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, just every time you drove, there was two or three mountains looking at you right in the eye.
Yeah. And they're quite a sanctuary too. Mountains
Yeah,
have a presence. Every mountain has a different presence to it. And I know the difference between our Mount Diablo here and the Sierras is quite
yeah,
startling. The Sierras are more like they're high, they're sharp, they're jagged.
yeah.
Mount Diablo is this beautiful, soft green mound that's gorgeous and welcoming. So a very different feel, different mountains. Yeah.
Yeah. So a question, I've had with other people, is there, nowadays, and I probably shouldn't read as many newspapers as I do, but is there like kind of a witnessing overload? Is there just a point where, your witnessing machine kind of shuts down for a while because it's too overwhelming?
Well, I think that you have to witness your tolerance for all the
Yeah,
news, that goes on. There's a certain point at which you have to just turn it off. I know that's true for a lot of my friends. I hear them say, "Oh, I haven't watched the news for a couple days because I just can't deal with it right now."
yeah,
And I think especially in the lockdown phase that we've just all gone through, and still are in to some extent because COVID's not exactly over. Um, I think we have to watch what works for us and what doesn't. And I think that also when you pay attention to the news too much, news is always about grabbing headlines.
yeah,
And so then we look at it and understand and pay attention to the fact that it's really about what's startling or what's shocking in the world. They don't necessarily do articles on people that are peaceful and happy.
yeah,
It's always about tumult or
yeah,
shock or something like that. So um, I feel like we have to limit ourselves and what we can take in and what we can't, and that's part of witnessing, I
yeah.
think.
Oh, there was an aside. There was a funny post, not a funny. I thought it was pretty impactful on LinkedIn. It showed a dog jumping up on someone, and the dog was talking, and he basically said, "I found this person. I saved a human today." No, it was really, it was like, we've had 3 dogs, so we feel the same way. It's, dogs are, I don't know, I think God's messengers or something. They're,
Right.
they're, 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 yeah, they do a pretty amazing job.
Yeah. Well,
So are there other poems about witnessing?
I do have a couple. Here's another one about the Pacific Rim. It's called View from the Pacific Rim. It doesn't take long for sandpipers to reclaim the estuaries, or the river to find its true course again, or for humans to find a new, slower rhythm on lockdown. Now, rarely in our cars, we are not surrounded by a constant motor rumbling. Instead, we find solace, even harmony, and walk in the flow of our own rhythm. We align with the river deep within, one we have forgotten, a calm even in the midst of a viral storm. We hear the hum of the earth breathe along with our own breath. We take in more fresh salt air. In silence, crests of sorrow and anger shed, waves of harmony fill the empty spaces. Age does not matter. Judgments of others dissolve. As I watch the flow return to its natural course, listen to crow, sparrow, seagull, we walk 6 feet apart, align with our own current, and become quieter inside.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very calming, very nice, very nice.
So I have another one.
Yep.
It's called The Promise of Attention. It's a little bit long, but I think it's worth reading.
No, absolutely. Listen, we this is the Poetry Freedom Hour.
Yeah,
We get to do what we want. You're
that's great. Well, this is in my book Mosaic, along with a bunch of other poems. Um, it's called The Promise of Attention, or If I Can Do This, So Can You. After he left, after the death of our daughter and the pain years it took to recover, the painful years it took to recover, after hearing that my dearest sister with cancer has had more bad days, I sit with all my feelings, the fear of losing you after she died, the outrage of being left. I sit with the loss of more family, of your sons that became my sons too. So today, instead of resisting more loss, I drop into it. On the beach, I rest on a log. My feet, legs, hips, spine are wooden. I do not push away or hold on, just sit in all the grief I've had, the fear of more to come. Then something wonderful happens. The fear of loss dissolves. Deep in the debris, there is a pearl. No, a diamond, deep in my pelvis glowing. It sits in an old wooden bowl for popcorn or bread or cake, a bowl of mixing batter or bread, and opens into a deep, deep calm, becomes the remnants of the hoped for diamond ring from a previous engagement years ago, which also dissolves, like my last marriage, into an inland lake, expands, like the vast sky or ocean. The light reverberates up my spine into all the tight places, all the paralysis, every tight fist and every muscle that held on. Let's go. But that is not all. The diamond grows, expands into my whole being. The tightness opens up again and again. I relax into my body. This temple becomes the Taj Mahal, glowing at sunset before the sun turns alabaster from silver to gold, the ocean gossamer blue, then fades, and the rays of the sun seem to vibrate in every direction until the salt and sea and air and fire dissolve into a constellation, a bowl of stars, empty, full, deep, clear, free.
Hmm. So I mean, is it okay to ask a poet if these are personal stories, or are they just I don't want to pry. It's probably not the right
Oh,
question,
yeah.
but they're very powerful. So
Thank you. Yeah, they were personal stories. Yeah, that all happened, I mean, over many years, but it still happened. And then you get to a point of grief where you just have to be with it. You can't ignore it anymore. And you have to just sit with it. And so sitting with grief
yeah,
helped me to release it. And that's what
yeah,
the poem's about. And also about coming into my true nature. And like, because sometimes in grief we feel like we've it's our fault, or somehow we get survival grief and survivor's grief. And actually, it has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with people's length of their lives and the end of their story, and then we have to cope with that end because our story isn't done yet,
yeah.
or we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't still be here. So
Oh, amazing, amazing.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we have to find a way to rise after that. And here's another one for you. It's called
Okay, great.
Before
Absolutely.
the Phoenix. Paste the feathers of one more disaster onto bones that are shattered and scattered. Like a beggar who tries to make sense out of another useless night, look for scraps among the debris. After the shock wears off through cold, cold lumps held in a fist, the tears come. So gather up the pieces, open your hands, let them tumble out together onto the stone altar. Wait and wait for them to cool. Sift the burnt offerings, exhaust them, then release the last fistful of ash.
Hmm. Really nice. Really
That's
nice.
before the phoenix.
Yeah.
So, phoenixes have to burn and die and then they can come back, but you have to let go they have to let go completely before they can be reborn. And I think some of us spiritually have a phoenix within us that has to rise again, but first we have to let go of everything. And that's a hard one. It's really hard.
Yeah,
So,
there's a saying at times, life happens between trapezes.
right. That's a good one.
Yeah, okay, you're out there alone without a net. How you doing?
Right, right.
So tell us, because I once again, I always want to just talk about other things I'm seeing. So
Yeah.
tell us about your Norwegian ancestors and how that, no, because I think it's,
Yeah.
once again, you have such a diverse palette of areas that you spend time in.
Hmm.
This is just another one that reading your bio just popped up over a period of time. So I just want to hear, why did that happen? Why is it important to you?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. These are the two books that I've just finished, The Legend of Randine Entering the Sisterhood, and then The Legend of Randine, The Laerdal Letters. And they came out of an experience that I had going to Norway after my mother passed. I happened to get a grant for writing that I was lucky to get. And I had enough money to go to Norway and discover where my ancestors actually came from. And I went to Norway and I went to Laerdal, which is where my mother's family was from. And Laerdal is at the end of a fjord, Sonum Fjord, which is the
Yeah.
longest fjord that goes all the way into Norway, 150 miles.
Wow.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I stopped and was in Bergen for a few days. And then I took a ferry boat back into Laerdal and stayed back there for a few days. And as I got to the tourist bureau in Laerdal, which, they have a big eye for information, I went there and I said, she looked at me and it was almost like she thought I was familiar. And she said, welcome to Laerdal. And I said, well, thank you. I said, my name is Lysne, my last name. It's my mother's maiden name. I took my mother's maiden name many years ago.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she goes, oh, do you know Håkon? I can call him if you like. I said, who's Håkon? Oh, your cousin. And I said, my
Yeah.
cousin? I have a cousin here? And so I was so excited. So I went to my bed and breakfast and I said, oh, don't bother him. And she goes, oh, that's so Norwegian. And, and I thought, oh, Norwegian, it's a Norwegian trait to not want to bother somebody, and it's like, yes.
Yeah.
So I went to my bed and breakfast and I got a call from Håkon. And we spent an entire day together with he and his wife and his child on the farm and the homestead where my family came from.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he was also into genealogy, as I am. And we talked, and he said, well, do you know about your grandmother, Randine? And I said, no. Oh, well, she was a midwife. And I said, really? I didn't know that. Oh, yes, see, it's right here in the big book, And so he showed me the connections and everything. So that's what inspired me to start writing this story, exploring. I first just was wanting to explore history of my ancestors. And then when I realized that she was only 15 when she had her first child, which was very unusual in Norway because
Yeah, I was going to say.
there's an age limit. 18 is the age
Yeah.
limit for women to then find a husband, not below that. But
Yeah.
and then I discovered her story, that she had lost her partner. She was going to get married, but she got pregnant instead, and he died on his ship. And then I just discovered all this stuff about her, like just looking at the dates
Yeah.
and at her birth dates and death dates. So she became a wet nurse to a child, and that then she met the father, and eventually it took a long time, but eventually they got together, and they had more family, and she became a midwife. So I had to write her story. It was so
Yeah.
compelling to me. And also, when you look at a family registry and you see birth dates and death dates, I just wondered what was in between all that.
Yeah.
What was between this time and this time.
Yeah.
So it made me very compelled to keep working at it, and then wrote it in between everything else, and that's how it came into being. It took 20 years, but it's there. So.
So is it published like in Norwegian also, or is it just in the US?
It's just in the U.S. right now. I'm hoping to get it published to get it translated. It's just, a big challenge to find the right person to translate it.
Yeah.
But I am looking for a translator, and it is I think it could become a movie. I've written a screenplay for the first book. The Entering the Sisterhood, it has a screenplay with it, so I'm also
Yeah.
looking for a screenwriter,
Yeah.
how to get into Netflix or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how it developed. Yeah, I was fascinated by how do you, what was it like in 1820 and 30, and no medical support. They had no medical support at all in the back country. It was the midwives who did most of everything, including people's wounds and
Yeah.
legs and all kinds of things like that. So
Yeah. So are there some poems that you wrote about the ancestors, or?
well, I have a couple of poems. I do have one in here. I have little poems that are scattered through the whole thing. Um, and let's see if I can find one here. Yeah, this is one called Arrival, and Ursula was her mentor. Uh, uh, Ursula turned toward home and read Randine's message as she slowly walked up the street back to her home. Arrival for Ursula. Born in a thunderstorm, hail crashing, lightning bolting all around, my mother, the sea, carried my little coracle to the other side, to the other side of her broad thigh, to the other side of the sea. Family on both sides stood around the shore, and I swam to Father's arms, to Odin's arms, as he was hovering overhead. And he said to me, my daughter, my darling daughter dear, you shall be the one, the one, the one. You shall be the one to carry on. Your heart the sail, your body the boat. Your spirit will blow your craft to inland shores, and I will be there for you, oh darling child, dear. I will be there to carry you as you carry those you serve, as you carry those you serve. Ursula, our midwife, washed me, my mother wrapped me, and soon I was on my way. How initiation flashes and destiny dashes us as we shape our lives from foam, as our lives are shaped from foam. Before I started on my way, I could hear my father's echoing as I stood on solid ground, solid ground, solid ground. Be not afraid of anything, as you shall always know you are being carried along, carried along, carried along. You will be carried along to where your destiny roams.
Mm, wow.
So that was a gift poem that she gave to her mentor as she was leaving leaving for Laerdal. So yeah,
So that was quite, when was that trip to Norway?
that was back in 1996. That
Wow.
was the same year my mother died, and then I went there and got to visit most of my family. On my father's side is also a Norwegian grandfather, so I'm half Norwegian and Danish and Scottish, and actually a
Yeah.
little African in there, from the Black Scots, and so I'm excited that this story is manifested now because it does give people a view of how people lived then. And it also gives a view of the heroism of just ordinary people, which I think is so important to bring out. Enough of the kings and the queens.
Yeah, I
We,
know.
we need to see the heroism of humans, of regular human beings. And that's what this whole series is about, this novel series. I've got a
Nice.
couple more coming, but they're not written yet. So,
So we have time for one or two more poems, and then we have to
okay,
close
great.
out our time.
Yeah. Well, let's see. This one is called Pacific Rim. You don't see them come or go, but they gather on the beach to pour their hearts into the ocean, to be with their families for the afternoon, to watch waves roll in one after the other. We came to the sea after our personal storm had passed, to walk and rest, to fall into silence. People watch, sailboat dream, sleep. We felt what was undone and let it go at the edge of the water. I gave strands of my hair as an offering. You sang to the ocean mother, sounded like a wail. I was already at the bottom, recognizing my essence in the deep underwater spring. Then we sat again, like children, like the others in the sand, with our feet dug in, our hands drawing full circles, waves humming an old Indian chant for the release to the sea of what we could not utter to each other, for what we had already let go.
Hmm. Yeah, I like the people pouring their hearts into the ocean. That was a good image.
Oh, thank you. Well, I have one more that I'd like to read if I could. Let's
Yeah,
see.
one more.
All right. This is called Honey Strands, and it really speaks to refuge and witness. And it's a poem I wrote some time ago, Honey Strands. It's time to wash and braid my hair, to sit alone and watch the bees, to hive within myself, taste honey. Now is the time for weaving, of gathering sweetness, humming golden fiber into my being. It is time to compose my internal fabric, to begin my tapestry from what has fallen to the floor.
Hmm. Hmm.
I have
So
that.
many images today.
Ah, yeah, well, I have that poem on next to my mirror up in my bedroom, and I keep it there because it helps me remember, like, being within oneself, even after, being alone for, gosh, I've been alone now for 13 years and lived
Yeah,
alone. It's a reminder of what I'm called to do, which was be with myself, be with this
yeah,
one, and,
yeah.
eventually hopefully find someone who's also into that too. So,
Well, what you've talked about. My wife gave me a Valentine's card from with a Mary Oliver poem. I'm
ah,
sure you're familiar with this. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement.
ah,
And then, of course, she says, I too am married to amazement, even after 42 years. So,
oh,
no,
beautiful.
I think you're hitting on a lot of different cylinders, and I'm sure that it's very nourishing to you, and obviously very nourishing to the people you touch.
Well, it's very exciting to be able to make a difference, even in a small way. And I think poems are a small way that we can touch each other and help each other grow. And then also I think my paintings, paintings and
Yeah,
writing, I mean, all of the creative work, whatever creativity that comes out of us, what often stops a lot of writers and a lot of painters is like, well, who's going to see this? Or who's going to hear
yeah,
it? And
right,
it's mostly done for ourselves, but then when we share it and it touches people, then we realize, oh, we only have to touch one other person. We don't have to
yeah,
touch 10,000, So,
right, right.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Robin, thank you very much.
You're so welcome, John.
I
Nice
wish
to.
there was a bigger audience because I think related to the Barnum Bailey family, I always like to get a lot of people under the tent. But
Uh-huh.
no, there'll be some people. You'll get a copy of the recording,
Okay.
and a bunch of people will take a look at it. No, it's really great. Thank you for just sharing all the different things today. It's really been quite amazing.
Oh, good. Well, so nice to meet you and so glad to be a part of the Stockbridge Library
Yeah,
poetry series. It's
yeah.
fun.
Dane was talking about having a group of people come on and kind of talk with the theme. So maybe that'll still happen.
Yeah, that would be great. Love to be a part of it. So,
Okay,
all right.
very good. I'm gonna end the recording and sign off.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks again.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.